Me again. Hey, how's everybody doing? I hope you're good. And I hope your summer's going good. And I hope you're enjoying whatever this is we're doing. Hope you're enjoying your television experience. Um, I'm enjoying making these videos. Talk any chance to talk about TV and comedy, I take it. So thank you for that. All right, Ali G. So if you can't tell, my videos are kind of like I'm like one behind you guys, basically. Um, so that's just how it is. I want to talk about Ali G because it sets up the rest of the stuff from this week: Cosby Show and Fresh Prince. It sets that all up. For just the lens through which we want to view those shows. Um, and you guys in your comments, kind of you were almost there. You were almost there. It's a very specific idea. Um, but anyway, the idea, like for me, the Ali G show. Now, the Ali G show, if you hadn't seen it before, of course, everybody knows Borat. Um, Fewer people know Bruno, and even fewer people know Ali G. Well, Ali G was the first character, Sacha Baron Cohen character, to kind of break. And he had his own show in England, and then HBO got its hands on it and sort of reworked a bunch of the episodes and put them on HBO in the early 2000s. And it's kind of this, this new hilarious thing, basically. And it's easy to write it off as just a silly show. But if you know Sacha Baron Cohen, as we do now, even more, um, if you haven't seen Who is America, his show on Showtime, that takes all this Borat stuff to another level, um, and that's some crazy stuff. But we know Sacha Baron Cohen is invested in the kind of comedy that we're talking about here, right? The kind of humor that exposes something that exists where shit's fucked up, that is trying to, make us rethink things that we thought we knew, right? Or we thought we had figured out. Um, and this show is, again, this is his first sort of foray into all of this. And I think the it all hinges on the discussion of class or social class. And you guys, you were you were there, right? Jaden was talking about um, the injustices that the characters face. Well, if you took that a step further, their social class is generally the source of a lot of those injustices, right? Um, Kaylee talking about characters of different backgrounds, right? You guys are all just being nice and trying to. You're basically saying the right things. Um, just take it one step further. Like, what are those different backgrounds? Like, where are those rooted in? Different social classes. Um, the humorous disconnect Shay was talking about. That humorous disconnect between Ali G and like Newt Gingrich, right? That's a class disconnect. And he I mean, he created these characters, and not just, oh, that would be funny. It just, I think too many people think comedy is just, oh, someone says, oh, you know what would be funny, and then they do a thing. Like, yeah, that happens, but for the most part, I think any comedy, especially that gets to this level, like it's a TV show on HBO, it's it's way more than that. It's not a coincidence that all these characters, Ali G, Bruno, Borat, are all considered a marginalized class, right? They're a, they're a marginalized group of people. So you have Ali G. What is he? Urban youth, right? He's kind of a I don't want to say gangster, but he's he's into hip hop, the way he dresses, the way he talks, his understanding of the world. It's all rooted in a lower class distinction, right? Bruno. Bruno is gay and foreign, right? So from an American perspective, like that's you're less than typically. That's the prevailing sort of um, sentiment, at least. Um, and then Borat is just, he's Middle Eastern, right? So we obviously have these prejudices against him. He comes from Kazakhstan, which is a super poor town. So he's poor, um, and it's just not a coincidence that all the characters are approaching these interviews and interactions from a disadvantaged class status. And that's what drives the humor, but that's also what drives the satire. And it's calling attention to the gaps that exist in our culture, right? There's social gaps. In terms of, um, there's social gaps, there's economic gaps, the income gaps, there's education gaps, there's social gaps, there's racial gaps, there's gender gaps. And Ali G, even more so, I think, than the other two characters, really drives that point home with the Newt Gingrich interview, right? The very first part of that episode. He's he's asking all these questions that to him they make perfect sense. And some of his questions logically make sense, which is kind of calling out some of the policies and things that these institutions have put into place. The whole thing about welfare, where it's like, well, after 4 years, shouldn't we start to get more because we've proven that we can, you wouldn't work a job 4 years and not ask for a pay raise. Like that's that is, yes, ignorant, but there's logic to it. That's his understanding of the world, right? Is that that's how it works. And that's, I think, what these three characters are trying to do is say, until these gaps are sort of closed, I mean, you're never going to close them all the way, but they're just huge, vast gaps now. The separation between the Ali G's and the Newt Gingriches of the world, right? Those in power versus those being uh, ruled or subservient or whatever it is. Like until the understanding of the world, that's the biggest gap. The gap in understanding. Like until like that gap is closed, it's going to be we're going to continue to go down this road of, as Jaden put it, injustice. It's just going to continue to happen, and it's unfortunate. That's what he's exposing. It's like they might as well live on different planets, right? Ali G and um, Newt Gingrich and Borat. Even Borat, that's his whole thing. Um, so that's a huge takeaway. When we talk about Cosby Show, when we talk about Fresh Prince, we're going to be talking about class. Then you're going to realize how intertwined class is with race and economics and gender and all the other things. You almost can't talk about one without talking about the other. Um, so, the Ali G show, I think, really demonstrates the gaps in our society, right? I mentioned them already: race, class, economic, social, gender, sexuality, and understanding. More than anything, understanding is how we understand the world to work. Um, the concerns of the people are so far, right, so far removed from the concerns of the powerful. And until you can, like I said, shrink that gap, it's just, the gap will get wider and wider until we start to look at things a little differently. Um, Good humor, good comedy, good television punches up. I don't know if you've heard that concept before. Punches meaning like your targets, your comedic targets should be people in power, institutions, corrupt institutions, all those kinds of things, and that's kind of another angle that Sacha Baron Cohen takes with these three characters, with most of his characters, is he's punching up, supposed to challenge the institutions of oppression, right? It's supposed to be like, level the playing field, close the gaps. Like that's what it's supposed to try to do. And look at this episode, right? This is a single episode of the Ali G show. He takes on all these major institutions. The fashion industry, which as Bella brought up, Bella and Shay brought up the um, the idea of how fashion interacts with class, right? And that whole, he's talking to the one, they were doing the white trash line, or like, we take the clothes off the poor people and we sell them. I mean, just so hollow, shallow, right? Like, um, the fashion industry claiming that they're as important as doctors and things like that. Like, Bruno's setting them up. It almost doesn't even have to. They're just incriminating themselves. Yeah, they should all be put on trains and, yeah, they should be. Like, all that stuff. So, like, that's what I'm saying. He's from this lower class position, each character. And each character is taking on a powerful institution that really doesn't give a fuck about them for the most part. If you look at it, right, the fashion industry, the politics, right, politics, government, drug enforcement, law enforcement, right, the whole last scene with all the drugs, confiscated drugs, the fitness industry, sort of exposing the scam of the fitness industry. Really white middle America, right? The guy with the gun shop. Jesus, it was like, man, I don't know. And again, this was early 2000s. Like those types of people have emerged. Trump brought a lot of them out of the woodwork. Um, corporate America, all those where he's pitching the ice cream glove, like that again, like gaps in understanding, like of just how things work. Um, and like how do you negotiate that, right? Um, and then the whole gun control, basically talking to the gun shop, gun range guy, and just kind of how insane that whole thing is. So I think he does a really good job of um, using these characters from lower lower marginalized groups to take on the institutions of power. That's, I mean, that's 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 what it's all about, guys. Basically, um, so when you think about it, um, what did I write? I can't read that. Yeah, I can't read that. They're all underdogs, right? All those three characters, and then Borat the movie, right? The movie sort of took these ideas to another level. Like that's something that Sacha Baron Cohen is just brilliant at. Like he probably could have just done a lot of derivative. He could have just rested on that. So when I went to Borat the movie, the first one, like he's got to do something. Like, he can't just stay the same. Like he's got to keep pushing, and he totally did, right? And then, as I mentioned, Who is America really pushes. Um, so you guys had some really good comments, like that were um, really getting at the gist of what I was hoping for. Um, Jeff brought up this idea of politicians debating more comically. I don't know if comically is what we want. More real, I think, would be people would be more interested. Because Trump brought the comedy thing. Comedy's too difficult for politicians. If that makes any sense. Trump was his first primary, the first one, um, in 2016. Like he was basically just an insult comic. He literally like, you're ugly, you're fat, you're stupid, no energy, like whatever, you know how Trump does. So he was debating more comically, and I guess people were more interested, but it wasn't a benefit. I think, but politicians debating more um, genuinely would be the answer. Um, if we really knew what these people stood for, what they believe, their values, their hopes and dreams, and all those kinds of things, I think all those things would be true. Our country would be in a way better spot. Um, Shay, Shay talked about the humorous disconnect, which again I think stems from the class gaps, basically. But I like that humorous disconnect, right? All the characters are outsiders, right? Well, that like why are they outsiders? My contention is it's because of their basically their social class. Um, Also talking about the gaps between the rich and the middle class. Like I said, you guys were right on it for the most part. Fashion in class. Zero. Shay was talking about it. Um, and then Borat really does this. I think the best of the three, um, revealing biases and prejudices of whoever he's talking to. Right. So the gun range guy just tapping into, like, when he's like, oh, in our country we take criminals and we get to shoot at them in the gun range. I don't know if that's true or not. In the world, it probably is. And the guy's like, oh man, he's like jealous, basically. He's like, we don't do that here. I don't know why, but we don't. Um, it's like revealing biases and prejudices. I think it's a comedic um, staple. Um, Bella bringing up the first line of the episode where he's like, I wish someone had told me that when kids hear the word politics, they shut it down. My point is, like, maybe they wouldn't if they were more like Ali G, right? If they were more like the Daily Show. I think that's where comedy has helped sort of um, advance interest in news or truth or whatever it is. And back to Jeff's point, um, if politicians debated more comically, well, I think having a comedic perspective has changed the way we view all this kind of stuff, right? All the stuff, Daily Show, Patriot Act, Last Week Tonight, um, even Real Time with Bill Maher, I guess, um, Ali G, I think have like at least aroused some interest in topics that people typically are like, ugh, here we go again. Like, please stop. Um, Kaylee mentioned that the characters are different backgrounds, which is, again, just another way of saying different class standing, social class. Um, and this idea I really love and will probably steal, that politics creates ignorance. I'm like, yeah, that's nice. Like, that makes total sense. Because who who wins if, like, politicians win if nobody knows what's going on, right? If everybody's ignorant and is just an idiot, that's to their benefit, right? So we've gotten to a point where I think you're 100% right. Politics creates ignorance. Um, and that's dangerous. Like, that's just dangerous. Um, what? I don't know what. I'm gonna look here. See what you said. You said something that made me think. Kaylee said these characters reveal how people's um, their actions or their words don't align with their beliefs, basically. Um, and that's close to something that I've been saying for years, right? Y'all know, we've all been in a situation, people like this who, um, you can say all the right things and mean none of them. Like, that's a thing. Um, which might go back to how politics creates ignorance, right? You can say all of the right things and mean none of them. And I just, one final thing was about Jaden brought up the ridiculous questions. Well, that's the whole point of the ridiculous questions, is, again, to highlight that gap in understanding of how any of these things works, right? Um, and if you really think about it, they're not so ridiculous. They're only ridiculous because of the policies that we have in place, basically. But um, yeah, there's just this is the this is the first this is the foundation for this larger discussion of class and how the Cosby Show approaches class, how Fresh Prince approaches class. Um, and that's what we'll be getting into um, in my next video. So stay tuned for that. Um, all right, I'll see you guys soon. So party.